The dawn bled like an old wound across the Arizona desert, spilling gold and red over the stillness of Eli Mercer's land. The air was cool, sharp, carrying the scent of mesquite and dry earth. Eli stood with his shovel in hand, the weight of another silent morning pressing on his shoulders. He'd been alone so long that even his shadow had grown quiet. The wind whistled through the corn rows, and sometimes he spoke to it, spoke to Mary, his wife buried beneath the cottonwood tree behind the barn. Folks in town called him gentle, but odd. A man too quiet for the world. That morning, as the sun climbed higher, he saw movement near the fence line, a figure walking barefoot along the edge of his field. She came out of the haze like a dream cut from the desert itself. Dark braids, sun-browned skin, eyes that caught the light like flint. An Apache woman. He froze, hands tightening on the shovel. She stopped a few yards away, her face unreadable. "I want a child from you," she said. Her voice didn't tremble. It was low and certain, filled with something that made the air around them still. Eli thought he'd misheard. Her words struck him like the sound of thunder rolling across empty sky. He opened his mouth, closed it again. I don't understand," he stammered. She only looked at him, her eyes deep, holding pain that needed no translation. Then she turned and walked toward the far side of his property, disappearing into the line of junipers. Eli didn't see her again until nightfall. He stepped onto the porch and found her sitting there in the moonlight, still a stone. He offered her bread and a blanket, but she didn't speak. She only nodded and stayed. From the window, Eli watched her eat slowly, her posture proud even in exhaustion. Something inside him ached, a mirror of his own loneliness staring back. By morning, she was gone. Yet the next day, she returned, and the day after that. She helped him carry water from a well, pulled weeds without being asked, her movements steady and wordless. And every night, she slept beneath the stars, never crossing his threshold. It wasn't long before the town began to notice. Old Maybelle, the midwife with a tongue sharp as cactus, saw the Apache woman near Eli's barn and told half the town by sundown. By the next day, Sheriff Cole Abbott came riding up in a swirl of dust. "You're harboring her, Mercer," he said, spitting tobacco into the dirt. "That woman's not yours to keep." Eli looked down, thumb rubbing the edge of his hat. "She's hungry, Sheriff. That's all." But the lawman's gaze stayed hard. "You bring trouble to this town. Don't say I didn't warn you." The word spread like wildfire. The shy farmer and his Apache woman. The whispers followed him through every store, every step down Main Street. Folks turned their backs. Kids shouted from porches. But Eli kept working his fields, his face turned toward the horizon, pretending not to hear. Each night, Nasha, he'd learned her name one quiet evening, would return to his porch. Sometimes she brought berries or herbs. Sometimes she brought silence. It became a rhythm, a language beyond words. One night, as the sun bled out over the ridges, he asked softly, "Why did you say that, to want a child from me?" She looked at the sky, her face illuminated by firelight. "Because I want my people to live. The world forgets us. A child is memory." He didn't know what to say. Her words reached something buried deep in him. The ache of having no one left, of watching the world move on without you. He realized then that what she sought wasn't desire. It was legacy, something wholly born from pain. They worked side by side as the weeks passed. She showed him how to read the wind, how to follow the hawk, to find water. He taught her how to grind wheat and mend fences. When he laughed, it startled them both. She smiled for the first time that day, a smile small and fleeting, like sunlight breaking through cloud. But the town's patience wore thin. Someone painted words on his barn door, "Savage Lover." Eli scrubbed them away before dawn, heart heavy. That night, while they slept, someone set fire to the barn. The crackle of flames tore through the dark. Eli and Nasha ran into the smoke, coughing, throwing water, their faces streaked with soot. Sheriff Abbott arrived after the blaze had eaten half the barn. "You brought this on yourself," he barked. "You should have sent her back where she came from." Eli turned, eyes burning, not from smoke, but from something fiercer. "She's human," he said. "That's enough." The sheriff stared at him, then spat and rode away. The fire died before sunrise, leaving only char and ruin. Nasha stood in the ashes, her face unreadable, her hand brushing his as if to say, "This is what standing means." He didn't pull away. The next morning, she was gone. No footprints, no goodbye. Only a small wooden feather left on his table, carved and smooth. He recognized it as a tribal symbol for freedom. He held it for days, carrying it in his pocket like a heartbeat. The weeks that followed felt hollow. The wind moved through the empty barn, whispering her name. He tended his crops in silence, haunted by her voice, by the look in her eyes when she'd spoken of wanting life to endure. Sometimes, at dusk, he'd see her shape in the distance, only to find it was dust or memory. Then, one storm-soaked evening, the sky cracked open with lightning. Eli heard footsteps outside his door. When he opened it, she stood there, drenched, weary, a bruise along her jaw. In her arms, she carried a small bundle wrapped in cloth. She looked at him the way the desert looks at rain. "He is ours," she said. Eli's breath caught. Inside the cloth was a baby, dark-eyed and still, his tiny hand curling around Eli's finger. The world fell away. There was no sheriff, no town, no hate, only the sound of rain and the warmth of new life. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but none mattered. Nasha's eyes told him everything. She had walked through storm and danger to return. This was her final act of defiance and grace. The three of them stayed through the night as thunder rolled across the plains. The roof leaked, the floor trembled, but Eli had never felt safer. Nasha sang softly in her language, words that rose and fell like a prayer. He didn't understand, but he knew it was for the child, for the earth, for the promise she had made. When morning came, the rain had washed the fields clean. The ashes from the old barn had turned to rich soil, and green shoots pushed through, stubborn and alive. Years passed. People still whispered when Eli came to town, but the fire of their judgment had cooled. Those who lived long enough to see the boy grow said he had his father's quiet eyes and his mother's fearless spirit. Eli built him a small cradle by hand, and each night he told him stories, not of war or hate, but of kindness, of silence stronger than cruelty, of love that never needed words. "Some things," Eli would say, gazing out at the sunset, "the world calls wrong, but the heart knows better." When the boy asked about his mother, Eli would point to the horizon, where the desert met the sky. "She's in the wind," he'd whisper. "She's in everything that still dares to live." And sometimes, when the wind blew just right, carrying the scent of rain and sage, he swore he could hear her voice again, soft, steady, forever unbroken. The camera would fade over the field, where wildflowers now bloomed through the blackened soil, and the house glowed with warm light against the twilight. Like, share, and subscribe to Frontier Myths for more tales of love, loss, and the wild beating heart of the Old West. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next story from the frontier, where even silence tells a legend.